Merci. So thank you to the organizers of this conference for inviting us to present, and to our co-presenters. And it's a little different talking about the Evergreen Cooperatives than about Mondragon or iCoop, where we're still in single digits in terms of millions of dollars, just to be clear on that. So we're at early stages. We're, in Mondragon terms, maybe we're at 1959 or something. We hope. But we did take a lot from Mondragon in designing the effort in Cleveland. This is a partnership. Not everyone in the partnership's on stage, but certainly Tracy played a huge role from the city of Cleveland. Myself, I was part of a team from the Democracy Collaborative, which is a NGO in the United States, which started in Maryland, but now has an office in Cleveland because of this project. And then, I'd be remiss without mentioning a couple of the other key partners. There are many, but one of which is the Cleveland Foundation, the philanthropy that helps support this whole project, and another is the Ohio Employee Ownership Center, and in particular, John Logue, who started getting involved with employee ownership in Youngstown, Ohio in 1977, trying to save a steel mill that had 5,000 workers who were laid off. They almost succeeded. They got federal guarantees, then an election happened. Well, you know how that works. But out of that came something called the Ohio Employee Ownership Center, and John Logue made many trips to Mondragon, to Italy, and was able to be present in 2009 when the first Evergreen Cooperative Laundry opened, and unfortunately passed away shortly thereafter. He had cancer, but so played a huge role in developing this project. So briefly, just to say about Cleveland, since we were talking about place, and Tracy, you can certainly say more about it. But it's a Rust Belt city. You went from 900,000 people in 1950 to 390,000 people by the 2010 census. It's coming back, but it's gone through some pretty hard times. And what motivated this work was a commitment to social inclusion. A commitment to getting people who had been previously incarcerated to have jobs, a commitment to get the underinvested African American neighborhoods, particularly in eastern sections of Cleveland, to be owners of businesses as well as have employment. And we tried to use the purchasing power. We can't replicate the ecosystem of Mondragon, but we could take some design principles from Mondragon. And the work, the design working with the hospitals and universities, so we call anchor institutions, really kind of is our way of trying to create a jump starting of a process. We don't have Basque linguistic or cultural solidarity going for us in Cleveland, but we have grit, we have a lot of determination, and with that, I think I'll leave it over to Tracy.
Thank you. And one of the big things, we have 3 cooperatives at this time, plus a cooperative that does the back office and accounting for all the cooperatives. But we have a laundry, a green laundry, we have a business that does solar installations, LED installations, and weatherization of homes. And we have the largest urban greenhouse in the United States of America. So these were the first 3 cooperatives. It was very important to me. At the time, I had 25 years in government, and too many times in the United States, we give incentives for businesses to come create jobs in our region, and then when the incentive is over, the company moves somewhere else. Many times the workers can't get there, and so it always felt very hollow that you would have helped someone get a job, only for years later they lose the job. Having a cooperative means it's rooted in the neighborhood, so it was something that we were very interested in.
And this is just a brief schematic of the structure and of the Evergreen Cooperatives. So you can see at the bottom there are 3 co-ops with an idea of developing a couple more. And as the previous slide showed, about 119 employees for those 3 businesses combined. Evergreen Business Services is a back office support, it's the accounting and human resources. And up above is the Evergreen Cooperative Corporation. So in a sense, the corporation is a 501c3, which is a charity organization. The businesses themselves are for-profit, multi-stakeholder cooperatives. So, I mentioned we took a number of ideas from Mondragon. We also took some ideas from our host here in Quebec. And so the owners, these cooperatives are actually 80% owned by the workers that are in them, but 20% ownership is with that nonprofit, which, puts basically purchasing members onto the boards of the co-ops. So it is a multi-stakeholder structure. And the reason we did that, well, there are multiple reasons, but one of the big reasons we did that is because there were dual purposes. We wanted the businesses to be profitable, we wanted the workers to earn from that, but we also wanted to ensure the long-term sustainability of this in Cleveland. And one thing that's, at least in the United States, been an issue sometimes with employee-owned businesses, if you make money, people might sell the business, and this provided a safeguard against that.
And a lot of times people ask us, well, why did the partners come together in Cleveland? We had an initiative with the Cleveland Clinic, Case Western Reserve University, University Hospitals, Cleveland Foundation, and the City of Cleveland called Greater University Circle Initiative. We have an area where we have 55,000 employees at these medical institutions and universities, and yet all around it was the poorest section of Cleveland. Cleveland is still the second most impoverished city in the nation. We have two different Clevelands. One is very successful and one part is very poor. So we were looking at how we could get these institutions to help the people around have more access to economic wealth. And what could we do? This was one of the things that we came up with. So of course we went to Mondragon to visit to see how would this all work. And we hired great consultants that could help advise us and provide us with technical assistance as we went through the process. So it was something that we were all very interested in and wanted to see if we could do it.
Okay, and this is some of the principles and theory behind what we're trying to do. And we'll discuss a little bit later, not just in Cleveland, but elsewhere. But so it's a place-based approach. It emphasizes equity and inclusion. As some of you may know, the United States has one of the leading, I guess, we were talking about Gini coefficients earlier, so kind of the opposite of the boss country. And such that about 20% of income now in the United States goes to the top 1% of the population. In terms of wealth, the Forbes 400 list of 400 wealthiest American families have more wealth than the bottom 3/5 of the U.S. population. That's 180 million people combined. So we're trying to change this, and while this is a small effort, we're hoping to set ideas that get expanded. So the emphasis on ownership is critical. Building local economic multipliers and keeping wealth local, and building this ecosystem so that this ultimately becomes the new way of doing business.
And then we looked at the criteria for business selection, so what types of businesses should we start? And we looked at, could they be profitable, what type of a payback period to the larger nonprofit who's giving some loans, high level of job creation, low barriers. It had to be something where they didn't take a lot of training for people to get good paying jobs, an ability to generate community wealth, and a potential for growth. So we hope that these companies could get larger. And very important was that the anchors that were supporting us could buy their products.
Now, I'll just add one thing on the business criteria. So one thing to note is that these emerged sort of after the initial businesses were developed, so it looks really nice and clean on that sheet. You'll never find, or if you are, you're a better consultant than I am certainly, you'll never find all 8 of these criteria lined up. One thing we do look for is not just for low barriers to entry, but sort of career ladders once you get the job. So, some of the businesses are more successful than others in that regard, but like the construction and energy company, which is called Evergreen Energy Solutions, you don't need a lot of high school or college education to be able to do that work, but it is skilled work. And because it's skilled work, it generates real value, economic value that can be captured and get certifications and so forth that build the skills of the workforce and the population so that you can start to equalize those incomes.
And then one of the other things that we needed to do was look at the people that we wanted to help by getting them jobs in the cooperative. So we felt we had to do some screening, and we had to provide them with some training, including life skills training, some management training. Most of these people never thought that they could be owners of a business, so we had to help them understand the mindset and what the responsibilities were. So we really had to look for a nonprofit that helped us come towards employment, who did a lot of the screening, a lot of this training for us. So again, we reached out to a nonprofit. And then what was the government role for the city of Cleveland? And I can say I came in a little bit late. They had started having conversations. The first group was actually in Mondragon looking, and they had an idea for the laundry. I heard about it, and I told my staff, hey, call them up. That's a great idea. Tell them we'd like to fund them. And that very day, they had just been turned down by a bank who said, we're not going to fund this, it's a startup. We don't fund startups. So they got a call, they were in Mondragon, and they said they almost drove off the road. And they were so surprised that one door closed and another door opened. And so the city stepped in to provide financing. And because we had an expertise with federal funding, we were able to work with our Department of Housing and Urban Development to be able to get funds from them, and they could leverage other tax credits in the United States, and we were able to get that done. In addition, our experience made us believe that for a startup company, we should make sure we built in reserves, which came in handy because we had two of the worst winters in history in Cleveland a couple years ago. I'm sure Canada experienced it as well. So the utility bills at the greenhouse were astronomical, and you have to keep it warm in there. And so the business was actually at risk of failing, but we had reserves built in, and that allowed them to be able to succeed. We also, on the greenhouse, we had to assemble 10 acres of land, and the city had a large amount of land in what we call our land bank, and we were able to help acquire the rest of the land through some federal funding that was available, and so we were able to do zoning, permits, and help them with land assembly. The City of Cleveland has a variety of economic inclusion efforts, including our community benefits agreement. So for 10 years, the city has had laws that requires companies who come to Cleveland, if you get an incentive from the City of Cleveland, you must hire City of Cleveland residents, including low-income Cleveland residents, for some of your construction hours. And we also require minority, female, and certified small business subcontractors on every project. But we went one step further a few years ago while this work was going on. We asked those same anchor institutions to voluntarily do the same thing when they did a construction project. So Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, Case Western Reserve University, all of our large institutions, and even one developer agreed voluntarily they would always hire Cleveland residents, including low-income residents, and hire some of these minority and female businesses to help in their projects. In addition, we worked on supply chain efforts, so I think there was another session on procurement. So we work with these hospitals, and as they're buying $3.5 billion of supplies, we ask them to buy some locally and even to have some companies move into Cleveland. And so we were able to bring Owens Minor into Cleveland to create jobs in our city, and we helped them with certain incentives like the hospitals did as well. So those are some of the things that we've been doing on top of our evergreens. So business challenges. I had to cough there because this is the toughest part. When we started off, all the anchors, we were working with the top people at these anchor institutions. They all said, we're going to do this, it's fantastic. The problem was that a lot of the people who worked for the anchors didn't quite get the message as it went down the chain of command. And many people were getting benefits. So if I sold toilet paper to Cleveland Clinic, maybe I would take the guy who buys the toilet paper for Cleveland Clinic to Disney World. every year on a vacation. And so they didn't want to give up those benefits. So we had a hard time getting people to understand that the top people at your organization are saying that you're going to participate in the cooperatives. And that took a little extra time. Time is money, and so that was difficult to convince people it's a new way of doing business, this is what we're going to do. We had some union competition, which limited some of the projects that the Evergreen Energy Solutions could bid on, and we didn't really have all of that back office work established that could really invoice and get the projects out the door. Steve, anything you want to add on this? I know
we both had, so I mean, this is, if it was easy, it'd be done all the time, right? So this is, you know, this is difficult work, and you know, we were technical assistance providers in knowing sort of new theories of social inclusion and economic development, but we were not industry experts in the industries that were developed, i.e. a commercial green laundry, you know, an energy company, and greenhouse. So, so there were things that were misdone on the design of the business that you would say you want to have more hectares or fewer hectares in the greenhouse. You would want to have more square footage in the laundry. And you know, some of the anchor buy-in issues were exactly what you said, but some of it too was, you know, not really, as a technical assistance provider, I would say, you know, the first rule of business is to understand your customer, and we had to learn that, and that's a common small business challenge, is to actually understand your customer, actually understand what it means to get the laundry in at the right time, at the right, right folds and all that. And so those are real business challenges and real skill building that needs to occur in marginalized communities if we're going to make a social economy function. So that's some of what we've learned. And the back office thing, we didn't even think about the back office, and realized after the fact, oh yeah, we needed that box that says Evergreen Business Services in the middle. That came 2 years after the first two businesses. And
one weird thing was that you cannot grow romaine lettuce in the greenhouse, and that's the #1 lettuce served at all the institutions, salad bars, etc. So we had to experiment with all different seeds to come up with a lettuce that could be grown there that was similar. So that was totally weird.
Okay, so what so he said this is sort of at least from Democracy Collaborative perspective, a prototype for doing different kind of development for social economy, and hopefully you're thinking about this with your city too. Some of you may be further along, some of you may not be as far along, but so there were some unique factors with Cleveland. This was led by philanthropy. Foundations happen to have a large role in the United States, although they're certainly not exclusive to the United States. And so a lot of things, foundations in the United States are often sort of research, R&D, research and development for new policy ideas. And it was notable, it was the first time really in US history that co-ops were supported by philanthropy. And that's no longer the case. Now that happens in a number of places. As a result, it had high profile. We were on, at one point we were on NBC Nightly News. That's one of the 3 main television networks in the United States. We were in The Economist. So that's high profile, right? And there were some decisions made that were perhaps wouldn't have been made otherwise. We in some ways, I think the foundation in particular pushed parties to do high profile and expensive businesses so that they would get the media impact which they wanted to get and did get. And then, the point 6 is, the back office service came after the fact. So we sort of did things on the fly and then worked around that. So that's one of the challenges of being a pilot. And then complex but innovative financing. Tracy could probably give a whole different session on that, but we'll go on to the next slide. So a couple places where we're doing this work right now is and right now I mean in 2016 is Rochester, Virginia, and Richmond, Virginia, and Rochester, New York. It'd be interesting if they switched places, but and so it's we no longer have to sell the concepts of co-ops as a community development strategy. That is now in the air in the United States. And as a result, it's being funded directly by City Council. This is a plus and a minus. It's a plus in the sense that you have public buy-in from the front end. It's a minus in the sense that City Councils tend to be cheap. Sorry for those of you from municipal government. I'm sure there's plenty of exceptions in this room. But you know, if it's a $500,000 project, that'll get cut to $250 or something like that. And you know, there isn't the same deep pockets. So we're looking at less labor-intensive businesses. One possible really big idea is that item 6 there is conversions of existing businesses to employee ownership. So Democracy at Work Institute, which is tied to the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives and Democracy Collaborative, are collaborating with a number of other partners on something called the 50 by 2050 projects. The idea is to have 50 million employee owners in the United States by 2050, including something called employee stock ownership plan companies. We have about 10 million right now, but that's a 5-fold increase that's being geared for. And with the retirement of what's known in the United States as the baby boomer generation, we think that might actually be possible. There's a lot of existing businesses that will go out of business. It's far easier to convert existing businesses incorporate them into the social economy than to start from scratch. So that's what we're trying to do.
And in Cleveland especially, we have a lot of small family-owned businesses where there isn't an heir to pass that business on to. They don't wish to go into the business in manufacturing. And so those businesses we're looking at for employee stock ownership.
And these are some of the ideas that we're looking at in Rochester and Richmond. And one other interesting difference of working for city government as opposed to working for a foundation. When we wrote our feasibility study for the Cleveland Foundation, that was a top secret document. When you write for a municipal government, it's on the website. You know, so these are public information. This is still in business planning, but there are businesses, you can see there's some overlap with what was done in Cleveland, and that you see construction in both. You know, but otherwise, these are different types of businesses that are being developed that are, you know, meet the anchor needs of those institutions. And in Richmond, Virginia, in particular, we're working with the hospital system on a community health worker business that we hope keeps people healthier and reduces hospital costs and provides better public health in the United States. And we're working with the Housing Authority on those other 2 businesses, both to build new housing, new social housing, and to provide property maintenance services, turnover of units, grounds maintenance, and so forth, with residents themselves owning the company. So we'll go to the last slide. And this is from Melissa Hoover, who's the director of the Democracy at Work Institute. Again, that's tied to the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops. And what this quote points out is that there's who is the owners matters. You know, if we're looking at social economy, back in the 60s and 70s, a lot of the worker co-ops came out of the majority white community in the United States, and were kind of middle class in terms of social background of the people forming them. That's no longer the case. So Evergreen, in this sense, was a harbinger of a real shift. So now about 3 out of 5 new members of worker cooperatives in the United States are people of color. And it makes a big difference in really the focus is no longer sort of having your little island of a business, but really building those ecosystems. And a number of other cities, in addition to Richmond, Rochester, are looking at this. You may have heard from some of them at this conference, such as New York City and Madison and Oakland, California, and the San Francisco Bay Area. So you're starting to see, we're not using the word social economy, at least not yet very much in the United States. Solidarity economy a little bit. But what is happening through things like Black Lives Matters and the movement for Black Lives is the call for economic democracy, for community control of the economy, has really started to take hold. And the number that are in worker co-ops and multi-stakeholder co-ops in the United States are paltry, less than 10,000 in those specific forms. But the growth rate is very high, and so we're optimistic about this having greater potential both in Cleveland, but also in other cities across the United States.
Thank Thank you very much. We appreciate it.